Welcome to TradeTheMBI.com. This is John. This report is for the 12th of February. Well, the ride has been quite interesting. We've got our first sell signals that took place way up here right before the breakdown started. And once we hit this drop down, well, I call it the little long wick, we had filled in the positive extremes we've been talking about from down here on the extreme histogram and going all the way back. And then we had the little pop. We talked about it needing to come back and refill that. We got down, once we got down to this major part of it right here, I was satisfied with it. But as I've pointed out many times before, you can get the follow through that goes with it. We did the exact same thing again. And that's really a clear indication that there just was a lot of generated buying. Right when we get down to that 25.50 range, we can see the short-term buyers have been involved in this stabilization from way back. We've gotten also to a point where we were extremely oversold in real terms for midterm buyers, and they started to launch into it. It hasn't fully repaired. I mean, there's been a lot of recovery. That ATR continuing to skyrocket, almost at 70. And the reason we're seeing this kind of volatility is that it's a little bit of a drain in liquidity, and it's creating just massive amounts of extra volume, meaning instead of larger lots being traded, particularly we're seeing this on the ES, the numbers are smaller, and so it's happening more frequently, and so it's more, I guess you could just say violent, and it's producing just big swings up, down, and rotates like that. So that's really the crux of what we're seeing and why this volatility has been so extreme. Still weak from this shakeout on the NASDAQ. Even though we're getting pop back here, I mean, all you're doing is getting back to literally the open of what was that previous extreme drop. Is it a surprise that we're getting some support in this? No, not at all. I mean, that was for bargain hunters. Unless you just assume that the economy stopped like it did in 2008, which there really isn't much justification to suggest it that way. There isn't this excess liquidity dry up via credit. What you have is a recognition that things just moved very quickly in one direction, and they're normalizing. And literally, that is what the S&P is about: is equilibrium and usually mean reversion. You'll go a distance, come back to it, go a distance, come back to it. So I think it's rather normal, except for the liquidity issue, which is not very normal. The euro, still in a little bit of a weak spot, coming off of this extraordinary run. It's still way outside its range, and I think that we're probably going to continue to see some evening out. We've had short-term buyers move back into it at this particular point, and that's holding it at this particular level. It still should drop down some more, but should doesn't necessarily mean it will. Here's a perfect example of what should. TLT should have been down near the 113, still at 118 range, though it has been cascading lower on our expectations for it to move lower. It's been slow, very slow at it. Had a little bit of a yawn there. Just got back from Carnival in Venice, and still a bit wiped out from that. We did a lot of moving around there. It was quite an exciting thing. Beautiful weather for it, but back now. So here we have it. Oil, keeps filling them all in. So we've taken all these positive extremes, and they've all been completely worked out. This is definitely going to put an ease on inflation. There's been a dramatic increase in the amount of production that's taking place. This will start to impact that, though, because you need a little bit stronger price to justify some of the activity. The fact that gold is holding right here at about this range. We had these positive extremes that were up here that were much higher, and we filled all the way back into, well, these all the way over here. So got a couple of more. The lowest one goes all the way to right about here. So there's still a little potential for that, but I think that you're like on a lot of these, we're seeing some short-term buyers taking advantage of it. Is it going to be enough to sustain them? Probably not at this particular point. You can see a dramatic turnaround. for midterm buyers on the DOC, and we're not seeing that from the shakeout either. Still straight lower. But the longer it holds up, the better. What's just crazy about this is that I can reduce these. It's like these swings have been phenomenal, but for one day, I mean, look at how tiny I have to shrink the chart to get a single day's action. And you can't even make out those individual bars, but we're talking huge upside runs even within these broader daily short, and just taking any of these has been phenomenal play. So this is what I was talking about before, though. I mean, I said there's no restriction in taking a long play because we're getting some huge distance out of these runs that you would otherwise not even see. For instance, in this particular case, 25.40, and it takes you all the way up to 26. I mean, that's 60 plus points for an intraday move that then retraces it and does the same thing all over again. This one produced a much earlier buy setup, even if you waited until you got the higher, but it initially produced the GAM. I thought it was good right here when it started to move up around 25.70, and then that 25.70 before it produced a first sell, went all the way to 26.30. So again, another 50 points. Put another slight retrace, this time not even to the 50%, and started to recover pretty quick. And it's broke back above positive shakeout in that. Syed moved underneath red there, and that was the pre-market beginning. And look at, we've shot way up since that pre-market. It's now at 26. We're going to fill back part of it, not all of it though, interestingly enough. Only to the 26.36 from where we are. So that would be very reasonable. But that's not the whole move, because the whole move really wasn't overbought. But you can see still just about getting ready that you could short, because now you finally have the brown flattening out. Through all of this, you have the rising brown. That's not a short opportunity. And again, even likewise here, when we had this massive move up, you can see we had the brown going. It wasn't until it flattened out that you were able to get a sell signal. So when the DOC spread finally activated, you're ready to go right about here at the 26.29 range. Likewise happened over here. You can see it, the brown rising in there, and then finally flattens out. But at that point, you had cyan under the red. Had a brief move to this downside. It's very soft, but then again, cyan went right below red, putting it right back into a strong buy spot, and then it wasn't until right over here that it finally did. At that point, you'd already had a flat or decreasing red, blue, and all of them. So it led to a little bit stronger, but still it took a while for that to reach the 50% because of that fade. You would expect it to reach a 50%. The problem in this case was the 50% started rising. So literally getting to that same point produced it right there. Did give a little more follow through and eventually went to the zero, but you had this massive increase from the zero, which reset the new plane. And so when the new set of buys came through, it was ready to take off. So all in all, some good action. I think, though, that even though we're going to see probably a little of this buyback at this particular point, still hasn't converted us from the overall detriment. You can also see the 26.86 is the overhead short. So above that point, I think that you would definitely be safe to be buying into it. The shakeout's still just a little bit of a mess. So to get a clear daily signal, it's going to take a couple more days, I think, to finalize it. Or even if we finish up strong in this one, get back to the area where probably normalized pricing is, would be somewhere right up here in the 26.67 range. Then I think it would be more interesting. But for now, I think your bias is still overall taking short opportunities, because I think there's still enough weakness built into there that there's going to be some good profit taking with that. But as always, continue to look for me on the Skype channel. Post up charts as warranted. Trade well.